In the north of England, there was a small town where the wind gently danced over the meadows and the mornings woke up to mist. A little outside the town, there was a farm, surrounded by stone walls, that had been owned by the same family for generations. Its gray-tiled roof had grown mossy over time, but inside life still existed, a life struggling to survive with hope and determination. The owners of the farm, Anna and James, lived here with their 6-year-old son, Elliot. On the surface, they were an ordinary family, but there was a pain they carried that no one could ever notice from the outside. Because Elliot had never spoken. When Elliot was born, everything seemed normal. He took his first steps on time, smiled, cried, and calmed in his mother's arms. But as the months passed, the words never came. His father read him books, and his mother sang him songs, but Elliot would only stare at their lips and then turn his head to the side. At first, they thought he was just a late talker. The doctor said, "Wait." Some children start speaking later. But as time went on, the waiting turned from hope into a quiet helplessness. Anna stayed awake at night, reading expert articles online, trying every suggestion she found on Elliot. James was more reserved. He kept his pain inside, constantly reminding himself that his son wasn't missing anything. But every silence, every unanswered call, every silent cry, they were all building invisible walls inside the house. Elliot was full of love. His eyes sparkled, but he had no words. The family, anxious that he couldn't hear them or that he couldn't understand something, tried everything from hearing tests to neurological scans. But the results were always the same. Elliot was completely healthy. He had no physical impairments, but he had drawn an invisible curtain between himself and the world. Maybe what he needed was a voice, a touch, or perhaps a miracle to lift that curtain. That spring came late that year. The rainy season had lasted longer, and the meadow behind the farm had turned into a swamp. James woke up early in the morning and went for a walk around the barn. He heard a sound. At first, he thought it was the distant creaking of a roof, but as he got closer, a low grunt and the sound of footsteps became clearer. Something was moving in the bushes behind the barn. As James approached, their eyes met. It was a horse, its eyes pitch black, its body half covered in mud, weakened. The marks of chains were still visible on its neck. Its breathing was irregular. Some parts of its skin were raw and wounded. James instinctively stepped back. The horse panicked for a moment, tried to rise, but then stumbled and sat back down. It was scared. It had been abandoned, and clearly it had been without the mercy of a human for a long time. That day, a stranger entered the farm, a nameless, ownerless being, but one whose eyes screamed exhaustion. At first, James didn't want to bring the horse inside. "There's a child at home," he said. "We don't know what this animal could do." But Anna fell silent when she saw the pain in the horse's eyes. She recognized that pain. She had seen the same eyes in Elliot for years. A partition was set up in the barn. The horse was walking with great difficulty. For days, it neither approached water nor food. James named it Solstice because when it arrived, the days had started to grow longer again. It felt like a turning point. But Solstice wouldn't approach anyone, especially James, reacting with hisses. Anna could only tend to it from a distance. Yet strangely, Elliot wanted to spend time with it. On the first day, Elliot sat by the barn door. He didn't say anything, he just watched. Solstice didn't even turn its head. On the second day, Elliot came with a carrot in his hand. He slowly slipped inside. No one told him to stay away because the horse wouldn't let him anyway. But Solstice didn't pull away. The carrot fell to the ground. Elliot stayed there waiting for hours, and in the end, the carrot disappeared. Days passed one after another. Elliot started to visit the barn every morning. He didn't speak. Solstice was also silent, but a bond was forming between them, woven with silence. There were no words, but there was trust. Something changed when their eyes met. Solstice started to bow its head to Elliot. Then it allowed him to touch its coat with his hand, and slowly it began to follow him with small steps. One morning when Anna looked out of the kitchen window, her skin prickled. Elliot was walking with Solstice. There were no ropes in their hands, no force. They were both silent, but they were together. On Elliot's face, for the first time in months, was a smile. Anna fought hard to keep herself from crying. From that moment on, everything on the farm began to change. Solstice became Elliot's shadow. It walked with him wherever he went. Elliot laughed in ways he had never done before, responded, held his mother's hand, and led her to the barn. He still wasn't speaking, but now he was telling stories, with his eyes, with his hands, with his steps. One day, a foreign car pulled up to the farm. A creaky truck came to a stop in the middle of the dusty dirt road. The man who got out was wearing an old jacket, but his gaze was still sharp and confident. He walked with heavy steps, as if trying to leave a mark with every footfall. James greeted him at the door, and Anna quickly took Elliot inside. The man looked around for a long while, then spoke with a cold smile. "There's a horse here that belongs to me," he said. "His name is Solstice." James was stunned. That horse was abandoned. It was about to die. "I didn't abandon anyone," the man replied harshly. "It might have run away, but it's still mine. I have the ownership papers." The words hung in the air in the middle of the farm. Anna stepped outside, her eyes filled with tears. Elliot quietly followed his mother. Solstice was restlessly neighing in the corner of the stable. When he saw the child, he stood up and extended his head toward him. But in that moment, everything stopped. The man pulled a few documents from his pocket. Indeed, there were papers showing that the horse belonged to him. James, with anger in his voice, asked, "Is this what you call ownership?" The horse had scars on its body. It was starving. The man shrugged nonchalantly. "I was going through hard times back then, but things have changed now. I want him back." In that moment, Elliot walked toward Solstice. He didn't say a word. He simply wrapped his small arms around the horse's neck. Solstice laid his head on the child's shoulder and closed his eyes. And for a while, the world around them fell into silence. The man watching that scene hesitated for a moment, but then his expression hardened again. Despite James's objections, the documents were legally accepted and Solstice was taken away. That day, a heavy silence fell over the farm. For the first time, Elliot cried in his mother's arms, but he still didn't say a word. With Solstice's departure, it was as if the light inside him had gone out. From that day on, Elliot showed no interest in anything. He didn't go to the stable in the mornings, didn't pick up a book, didn't ask for his toys. At night, sometimes he would get up from his bed and look at the empty space where Solstice had been. For Anna and James, this loss wasn't just of an animal. It meant the severing of the only bond their son had left. Months passed. The season changed from summer to autumn. The trees turned color, and the wind began to blow colder. Life on the farm slowed down, but the emptiness inside them remained. Elliot still wasn't speaking, but every morning he would look out the window, staring into the distance, beyond the hills, as if his heart was still waiting for someone. And then, one morning, the sky was gray. Light rain was falling. As James was carrying the milk cans, he noticed a silhouette appear on the distant dirt road. At first, he thought it was an illusion, but as the figure got closer, he recognized it. The wet mane sticking to its forehead, the dirt covering its body, but still walking proudly. It was Solstice. It had come alone. There was no saddle on its back. No one was with it. It had simply returned. James shouted and Anna rushed outside. Elliot, however, was looking out the window. His eyes widened. His breath quickened. For a moment he paused. Then he opened the door and ran outside. As soon as Solstice saw him, it quickened its pace and galloped toward him. Elliot opened his arms. Tears were streaming down his face. And just as he stopped in front of the horse, Elliot uttered the long-awaited words, "Solstice!" Anna collapsed to her knees. James held his breath. In that moment, it was as if the sky had cleared a little more. Elliot had spoken his first word, and this word was the name of an animal. But it was more than that. It was the name of loyalty, love, and trust. Solstice was welcomed back to the farm. A few days later, the man who had come in the truck appeared again, but this time he only stood at a distance. He saw how Solstice approached the boy. He heard Elliot say, "Welcome home." The man turned to James. "This horse is no longer yours," said James. "It's Elliot's." The man lowered his head. "I know," he said. "I just came to see this and to say goodbye." That day the man left, and he never appeared again. Elliot began to speak, very slowly, carefully choosing his words. But now a door had been opened, and love had entered through that door. His bond with Solstice was now beyond words. They walked together, grew together, The family was whole again, not only with a child, but also with a horse. The farm was no longer a lonely place. It had become a home where miracles quietly lived. And this miracle was not limited to Elliot speaking. After Solstice's return, noticeable changes began to take place in the child. He started waking up early in the mornings, running to the barn, and taking great care of Solstice. He learned to ride the horse, first with short circles, and then extending beyond the boundaries of the farm. He loved discovering the wind with him, running silently beneath the stars, and speaking, telling stories to Solstice. At first, the words were whispers, then they transformed into tales. Anna and James every morning listened to their son's voice as if it were a prayer. Sometimes it started with made-up stories he told while brushing Solstice's mane, and other times it was with simple questions like, "What will make you happy today?" Elliot's inner world had finally begun to flow outward, but there was something else. Solstice's return had caught the attention not only of Elliot, but also of the entire town. Especially the neighboring farmers began to talk about this unique bond. "That child, he talks to the horse," one would say. "It's as if they have their own language," another would add. Elliot stood there, his small figure silhouetted against the crowd, Solstice standing beside him, calm and steady. The moment felt suspended in time. As he spoke, his voice, once so quiet and lost, now carried with an unexpected strength. "This is Solstice," he said, looking out at the audience with newfound confidence. "He's a horse, but he's also the one who found me. I healed his heart, and he gave me my voice back." The crowd was silent for a beat, unsure of what to make of the boy's words. Then, as if the air itself had shifted, applause erupted, loud and heartfelt. Elliot's eyes shone with something deeper than joy. It was the light of a boy who had found his place in the world. Anna rushed to him, arms wide, her tears flowing freely as she pulled him into a tight embrace. James, standing just behind, stood proudly, his chest swelling with emotion. In that moment, the world around them seemed to echo with the power of Elliot's words. His voice was no longer just the voice of a child. It was a voice that spoke of healing, of transformation, and of a bond so deep that nothing could break it. After the show, a steady stream of visitors began to arrive at the farm. People wanted to see Elliot and Solstice. One morning, a woman stood by the fence. Beside her was a young girl about Elliot's age, who avoided eye contact and kept looking down at the ground. The woman approached Anna. "My daughter, Mia. She doesn't speak, not to anyone, but she loves horses. Maybe you could help her." Anna rushed inside and told Elliot. Elliot grabbed Solstice's lead rope and went over to Mia. He didn't say a word. He simply guided the horse down to her level. Mia hesitated at first. Then she slowly reached out her fingers toward Solstice's nose. Solstice gently touched his nose to the girl's palm. In that moment, their eyes met. A small smile appeared on Mia's lips. That day, Elliot didn't say a word. But when evening came, he turned to his mother. "Maybe one day she'll speak," he said. But first, she needed to touch Solstice. This event sparked something on the farm. Silent children began to arrive. Those with anxiety, those who had experienced fear, the abandoned or the broken. All of them approached Solstice, crossing the small bridge of trust Elliot had built. And with time, each one healed a little more. As time passed, the farm began to function like an unofficial therapy center. Elliot had become someone who carried not only his own story, but the voices of others as well. And Solstice was no longer just a horse. She had become the bearer of a miracle. But life was never just about peace. One night, a violent storm hit. Rain came down like whips from the sky, and the wind howled as though it could tear the farm apart. Elliot jolted awake, hearing Solstice's frantic neighing. When he ran to the barn, he saw one of the horse's chains had broken, and the animal was panicking. But Elliot wasn't afraid. He approached slowly, and as soon as their eyes met, he spoke. "I'm here." Solstice suddenly stopped. Her breathing was still fast, but her gaze was steady. Elliot extended his hand, resting his head against the horse's neck. "I'll always be here, just like you." That night, the storm passed, but it left behind a bond unlike any other. They now knew they could overcome fear and uncertainty. And so, the days flowed by. Months, then years. Elliot grew up. Solstice aged but never slowed down. And one day, Elliot turned to his family. "I want to expand the farm. I want more children to come here. I want more hearts to heal." James and Anna looked at their son, their eyes filled with tears. Their son was no longer just a child who could speak. He had become a heart that could hear the voices of others. The farm was no longer just a home, but a fairy tale world where stories rewritten with hope were born. Every morning, as Elliot began his day, he was not just a farmer working in the fields, but a part of a miracle. Solstice, more than just a horse, was a teacher who showed him how to face life's challenges, wait with patience, and harness the power of love. Slowly but surely, the farm grew bigger with each passing day. The family, who had once lived in anxiety and fear on these very grounds, had now become a symbol of trust, love, and loyalty. The farm was no longer just Elliot's sanctuary, but a place of salvation for other children as well. Here, a child learned not only to trust animals, but to trust people as well. One morning, Elliot and Solstice took a walk on the hill near the farm. There was a peaceful light in their eyes. Solstice lowered his head and, as always, moved closer to Elliot. Between them, there was nothing left but the deep bond that had formed over the years. Nothing could separate their paths anymore. In that moment, Elliot realized how quickly time had passed. With each step the horse took, a lifetime had gone by. Solstice had completed the lesson he had given to Elliot and everyone who trusted him. On this land, no matter how difficult things might be, there was always hope that everything could heal. Every corner of the farm, every tree, every stone whispered this truth. And in that very moment, Solstice slowly turned his head, his eyes filled with the pain of the past, yet also with that strong sense of trust. This trust was not just the bond of a horse or a child. It was a symbol of the trust we all shared, the trust we had built together. 15 years later, Elliot was now 21 years old. Time had given him both deep wisdom and a quiet charisma. The little boy who once hid his storms in silence had now become a young man who captivated not with his words, but with his presence. The stillness in his eyes was still there, perhaps, but now it carried peace, not fear. Solstice was still by his side. Aged, with hints of white in his mane, he could no longer run freely across the fields or challenge the morning winds, but he was still with Elliot. Every morning he was the first to hear his voice, and every night he was the one to share the first glance at the stars bidding farewell. Elliot and his family had transformed the farm. It was no longer just a shelter for horses. It had become a sanctuary of hope for children. Children who couldn't speak, who couldn't express themselves, who had once been lost within their own worlds, now felt understood for the first time on this farm. And each of them, in their own journey, was reliving the silent bond Elliot had once formed with Solstice. The farm had been renamed Solstice Way. Above the large wooden gate, there was a sign that had faded with time, yet its spirit remained undiminished. Some voices are heard not with the ears, but with the heart. That morning, as the sun slowly rose, Elliot entered the stable. Solstice had quietly lowered his head, as if sensing the moment. Elliot approached, placing his hand gently on the horse's mane. As their eyes met, there was a silent farewell between them, a quiet but profound parting, painful yet peaceful. "I'm letting you go," Elliot said softly, "because your voice now echoes in the hearts of 1,000 souls on these lands." Solstice saw the sun for the last time that morning. His eyes closed gently, gracefully, like a star fading from view. The farm was enveloped in silence that day. But this silence was not sorrow. It was a form of gratitude. Everyone knew that Solstice had been more than a horse. He was a miracle, a teacher, and a turning point in their lives. That night, under the stars, Elliot placed a stone. He carved only one sentence into it: a miracle that began in silence, a lifetime told. And Solstice's story was no longer just Elliot's. It became the story of every child who set foot on that land. If you liked our new story, please like, share, and tap the bell to hear new stories told always.